A single sound. Metal, tapping on metal, somewhere above your head. You're lying in the dark, inside a steel tube, on the floor of the Atlantic. 243 feet of black water set between you and the sky. The submarine you served on flooded and went down this morning. Half the crew is gone. The men in the aft compartments never had a chance. Now the cold is coming through the hull, and the air is turning thin and sour. Every breath you take makes the next one worth a little less. You know what the Navy knows. In every submarine disaster before this one, the men on the bottom stayed on the bottom. No one has ever come down 243 feet and brought a sailor back alive. Not once. So you have a choice. Do you spend your strength hammering on the hull, trusting that someone up there has found a way? Or do you save your breath, close your eyes, and accept what the sea has always done to men like you? If you were there right now, in the dark, in the cold, listening to your own heartbeat, what would you do? Today, we meet a man who never sank an enemy ship, a submariner whose greatest victory was measured not in tonnage destroyed, but in men brought home from the bottom of the sea. He invented the way out of a sunken submarine, tested it with his own lungs, and then stood on a rolling deck and pulled 33 men back from a depth no rescue had ever reached. His name was Charles Momsen. The Navy called him Swede. Let's find out what he did. Before we begin, take a second to hit like and subscribe. June 21st, 1896. Flushing, New York. Charles Bowers Momsen is born into a Danish-American family, which doesn't stop the Navy from nicknaming him Swede, and the name sticks for the rest of his life. He fights his way into the Naval Academy at Annapolis. He graduates in 1919, an officer of a Navy that has just watched the First World War prove what submarines can do. Momsen chooses submarines. Small crews, thin steel, no room for error. A service where every man aboard knows the sea is trying to get in. By 1925, he commands a submarine of his own, the S-1. He is 29 years old. September 25, 1925. Off Block Island, a steamship rams the submarine S-51 in the night. She goes down in 130 feet of water with her crew inside. Momsen takes S-1 to the scene. What he finds is an oil slick spreading on the surface, and beneath it, somewhere, a steel hull full of men. There is nothing he can do. There is nothing anyone can do. The United States Navy, the most powerful navy on earth, has no way, none, to reach a man trapped in a sunken submarine. Momsen circles the slick until there is no reason left to circle. Almost every man aboard S-51 dies. Something in Momsen refuses to file this away as bad luck. In 1926, he sits down and writes a formal proposal to the Navy's Bureau of Construction and Repair. Build a diving bell, a rescue chamber that can be lowered to a sunken submarine, and carry her crew back to the surface. The Bureau reads it. The Bureau shelves it. Impractical, the drawing said. Not worth building. December 17, 1927. Off Provincetown, Massachusetts, a Coast Guard destroyer rams the submarine S-4. She sinks in 110 feet of water. This time, 6 men survive the sinking. They seal themselves in the forward torpedo room and wait. Divers reach the hull. Through the steel, they hear tapping. Morse code, hammered out by freezing hands. The tapping asks, "Is there any hope?" A storm rises. The equipment fails. The days pass. The honest answer comes back through the steel. No. The tapping slows. Then it stops. All 40 men of S-4 are gone. 6 of them slowly, in the dark, asking a question their Navy could not answer. Momsen carries that question for the rest of his life, and he makes a decision that will define it. If the Navy will not build a way out, he will build it himself. The public outrage over S-4 forces the Navy's hand. Suddenly the shelved ideas are worth looking at, and Momsen is the man they turn to. But Momsen has learned not to wait for permission. Working with the chief gunner's mate named Clarence Tibbals, he designed something a sailor can wear on his chest. A rubber bag, a canister of soda lime, a mouthpiece and a nose clip. Breathe out, and the chemicals scrub the poison from your breath. Breathe in, and the bag gives it back as air. Strap it on, flood the compartment, open the hatch, and rise, slowly, breathing all the way up a line toward the light. They build it in their off hours. They test it in a tank, and then in the muddy water of the Potomac River. Here is the thing about Swede Momsen. He never asked a sailor to trust a piece of equipment with his life, until Momsen had trusted it first with his own. In 1929, he takes his invention down to 200 feet himself. If the bag fails, the Navy loses an officer. The bag does not fail. The Navy gives him the Distinguished Service Medal. The fleet gives the device a better reward. They give it his name, the Momsen Lung. The Navy raises S-4 from the bottom, the same submarine, the same steel that once carried the tapping of dying men. They rebuild her as a test ship, and Momsen takes her down on purpose. He floods her compartments, opens the hatch, and escapes from 40 feet. Then, with a torpedo man named Edward Kalinowski, from 207 feet, the boat that had asked, "Is there any hope?" becomes the boat that proves the answer is yes. And the diving bell, the shelved, impractical diving bell, it gets built after all. Momsen designs the prototype. A lieutenant commander named Allan McCann refines it into its final form. A steel chamber, shaped like a pear, lowered on a cable from a ship above. It seals itself over a submarine's escape hatch, opens the way, and carries men up, 7 or 8 at a time. When it enters service, the Navy names it the McCann Rescue Chamber. Another man's name on the machine Momsen conceived. Momsen keeps working because he is already chasing the next problem, depth itself. At the Washington Navy Yard, he leads an experimental diving unit, replacing the nitrogen in a diver's air with helium, work that will let divers go deeper than 300 feet and come back with their minds intact. 10 years of tanks, rivers, test escapes, and paperwork. 10 years of preparing for a day the Navy hoped would never come. May 23, 1939. Off the Isles of Shoals, New Hampshire, the brand new submarine USS Squalus slides under the Atlantic on a test dive. A main valve fails. The sea pours into her engine rooms. She hits the bottom at 243 feet, deeper than any rescue in history. 26 men drown in the flooded compartments before they can seal the doors. 33 are still alive in the forward half of the boat, in the cold and the dark. And in Washington, a telephone rings on Swede Momsen's desk. Momsen reaches Portsmouth with his divers and his equipment. Above the sunken Squalus, the rescue ship Falcon anchors and steadies herself against the swell. Swinging from her deck is the pear-shaped steel chamber. 10 years of Momsen's work, about to meet its first real test. Think about what is riding on this. If the chamber fails, 33 men die, the way the men of S-51 died, the way the men of S-4 died, slowly, beneath a Navy that can only listen. May 24th. Late morning, the chamber goes down the guide line, through water that turns from green to black. It settles onto the escape hatch of the Squalus and seals. The hatch opens. Air from the surface spills into a compartment where 33 men have been rationing every breath. Up they come, 7 and 8 at a time. First trip, second trip, third. Each round trip takes hours. Lowering, sealing, loading, rising. On the surface, the survivors step onto Falcon's deck, gray-faced, shaking, alive. Then the last trip, the final 8 men, the last souls aboard Squalus, climb into the chamber, and it starts up through the dark. Partway to the surface, The hauling gear jams. The crew on Falcon ships to the wire itself, and then the wire begins to fray. Strand by strand, the steel unravels 200 feet over the bottom of the Atlantic. Inside the chamber, 8 survivors who have already cheated death once feel their ride to the surface stop. Lower it back down. Momsen's team decides, gently, all the way to the seabed, before the wire lets go. A diver goes down into the dark to cut the fouled cable away. And then the men on Falcon's deck do the only thing left. They take hold of the wire with their hands, hand over hand, timing each pull to the roll of the ship. They haul the chamber up through 240 feet of water, not with machinery, with backs and palms and patience. The chamber breaks the surface. The hatch opens. The last 8 men of the Squalus climb out into the daylight. 33 men went to the bottom alive. 33 men came back. 13 hours of rescue, 4 trips of the chamber, 0 lives lost on the way up. It is the first time in history that men trapped in a sunken submarine have been rescued from the deep. The question hammered through the hull of S4, is there any hope, finally has its answer. For the Squalus rescue, 4 men received the Medal of Honor: William Bathurst, Orson Crandall, James MacDonald, John Mielowski. Divers and chamber operators, Momsen's men. Momsen himself receives no Medal of Honor. Not for the rescue he led, not for the lung he breathed through at 200 feet, not in his entire career. The chamber that saved the Squalus survivors carries another officer's name to this day. He goes on serving. In the Second World War, he leads submarines into the Pacific, and when torpedoes keep failing against enemy hulls, Momsen does the most Momsen thing imaginable. He helps recover a live, unexploded torpedo from the water himself, so the flaw can be found and fixed. He retires a vice admiral. He dies in 1967, and the Navy buries him at Arlington. Today, a guided missile destroyer, USS Momsen, carries his name across the Pacific. But if you want to know what his work was truly worth, look at one more date. October 1944. The floor of the Pacific, 180 feet down. An American submarine lies sunk after her final, legendary patrol, USS Tang, the boat of Commander Richard O'Kane. If you've been with this series, you know that name. His story began this trilogy. In Tang's flooded forward room, trapped men strap rubber bags to their chests, mumps and lungs. 5 of those men breathed their way up 180 feet of open ocean and lived, the only Americans in history to escape a sunken submarine with no help from the surface. 15 years earlier, a stubborn officer had carried an untested rubber bag into 200 feet of water because 2 crews had died listening for help that could not come. Every breath those 5 survivors took on the way up, that was Swede Momsen, keeping a promise to men he never met. Courage is not always a moment. Sometimes courage is 10 years of unglamorous work on a problem everyone else has agreed to live with, tested on your own body, paid for in advance, so that strangers you will never meet can have a way out. Most of us will never hear tapping through a steel hull. But every one of us knows that moment, when a problem is real and ignoring it is easier, and fixing it will cost us something no one will ever thank us for. So go back to the bottom of the Atlantic, one more time, 243 feet down, in the cold, listening. If you were there right now, would you believe someone was coming? Because of one man, 33 sailors were right to believe. This concludes this episode. Thank you for watching Forgotten Valor. Next, we'll meet a Green Beret who heard the doctor say he would never walk again and answered them by running straight into 6 hours of hell to carry 8 men out on a bag full of shrapnel. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to support us. Thank you. Their stories were nearly lost. Subscribe, so they are never forgotten.